This has to be a joke. There's no way. This has to be a joke. What's this one?
Welcome everyone to the World Blitz Championship quarterfinals.
This is a joke, right?
The fourth and last game. Result so far is 1.5 versus 1.5. So this could be a decisive game. Hans Niemann facing Magnus.
Wait, is this real commentary or not?
Italian opening the Yoko piano variation. He goes for A3, which covers G4 and also gives some pressure to the white team.
Wait a second. This is a joke, right? Wait, this is a joke, right? This is not real commentary they did live, right? This has to be a joke. There's no way. This has to be a joke.
Top is him with a move pawn to A6. And now Hans goes for C3. He has two ideas.
It's a voiceover, yeah, okay.
D4
Okay.
in the near future. Or you can also go for a queenside expansion with the move pawn to B4, attacking the bishop on C5. Rook to E1. You want to push D4, then E4 needs to be protected. Magnus goes for the prophylactic move pawn to A6. Now you got some space for the bishop on the A7 square. And now knight B to D2. Your usual regroupment for the knight. This knight usually comes to F1 and later to G3. Look at the bodyguard over there with the green hoodie, you know, holding the audience so they cannot jump over the board, but also he can resist the temptation of looking back to see what's going on the board. Now Hans is probably going
This is some weird commentary.
G3, right? And Magnus goes for bishop E6, fighting the Italian bishop. So the bishops are traded. Rook takes E6. And probably the most natural move now is to push D4. Right after D4, Hans is actually threatening to win the game immediately with a fork on D5. So now Magnus has two options. Either to go for D5 and then the center actually explodes, or you can actually remove the rook from E6. Probably the most natural square for the rook is actually E8.
Rook E8,
yeah. E7, then knight F5 comes.
Is this Nixon's?
Who's
doing this commentary?
3+2. You are liking this kind of content.
This sounds like Archer's Nixon's, right?
Please subscribe
Maybe I'm
to
wrong.
our channel. Rook to E8 from the Viking of chess, the Ragnar Lothbrok of chess. Magnus Carlsen, now bishop E3, completing development. Now pawn takes E4. You're actually forced to take back with the bishop, otherwise E4 could be hanging. And now if the bishop takes D4,
we'll get this commentary in the World Cup.
Maybe bishop on D4. You can actually take with a knight, or you can also take that bishop with the A7 bishop. In any case, you know, the C file could be open actually for a white rook. The rook on C1 could be putting some pressure against the C7.
I mean, yeah, the voice is a little bit annoying. Let me do my own commentary, I guess. Let's see. What do we have? Okay, so, I mean, I did live commentary this at the time, too. Okay, I muted the guy. You'll get my own commentary. Okay, so here Magnus is debating. He's getting a little bit low on time. He's debating whether to trade the bishop on d4 with the knight or the bishop. He's also considering whether to play something like knight h7. Mostly it's about which trade and then if he can play d5. That's what it comes down to. Magnus using a little bit too much time here as well. Getting a little bit low on the clock, which is not a good thing here, especially because Hans's moves are objectively easier at this point in the game. So he plays knight d4. Hans is going to take with a pawn and build a big white center, of course. Magnus goes c6, trying to stop d5 or e5 here. He still has the bishop on the long diagonal from a7 that hits the king on g1. Queen b3, very solid move here with the idea of playing rook a d1. Rook's in the center, two pawns in the center. Looks pretty good. Get rook b8, rook a d1, all very logical moves here. Magnus shaking a little bit nervous here in this position. Isn't that Anna Kramling? No, I think that if you're talking about who's behind the board, that's Dina Bell and Kaya. We get rook a d1. Magnus, TikTok. Who's the guy with the weird jacket on the right, though? Who's the guy on the weird right? With the jacket and the earrings? He looks a little bit out of place for a chess tournament. You get rook e6. Magnus wants to go queen e7 potentially. This is a very dangerous spot to be in, by the way, if you're Magnus here, because you're down a minute and a half on the clock, and Hans's moves are much easier as well. Too boring, make it exciting. Yes, exactly. Magnus debating, queen d7, looking for something. Unsure, a little bit unhappy here, because Magnus very rarely gets low on time like this either. When Magnus gets low on time, it's a bit of a tell that you know he's in trouble. So he plays g6 here, hoping to move the king up to g7. He also stops knight to f5 as well. Hans plays queen to c1, hitting the pawn on h6. Magnus debating g7, h7, not sure which square to go to because he's worried about knight h4, knight f5, and D's knights are coming. So we get king g7. Hans looking to play knight h4. He was reaching for the knight at first, and then he grabs the queen and plays queen f4. Big pressure on the clock here, by the way. Big pressure for Magnus, down 1.5 minutes here. Tick tock, tick tock. Of course, this also is a big difference between increment and no increment. With no increment, Magnus loses this game every time, but 2-second increment, it makes a difference. Goes queen e7, has to worry about knight to h4 here, which Hans plays, trying to go knight f5. Magnus plays king h7, another solid move here. The one good thing for Magnus is he can play rook a8 or rook b8, create the triple stack on the file. Is he going to play rook e8? He is. He gets a triple stack. We get e5. Magnus plays knight d5. Down 2 minutes on the clock here, by the way. 2 minutes. Down 2 minutes on the clock here, but easier to play for Magnus. Typical chess game audio is a lot of coughing. Probably, yeah. Yeah, probably. Hans thinking. This, by the way, I'd also say is a situation where I think if you put almost anybody else in the situation, they would lose this game. With the black piece. We get rook e5 here. Now the position starts to simplify a little bit. Magnus has options. He can trade the rooks on e5. He can play bishop b8 as well. Getting low on time here, but has to make a decision. Plays bishop b8. Very solid move here, forcing the trade of the rooks potentially. Why are you watching this? Because this is some good content. That's why. I think at this point there are very few players who could save this due to the time discrepancy here. Very few players. However, once the queens come off the board, even though Magnus is missing all of his time, his position becomes too easy to play. Ollie Reza at this point would probably save it too. In fact, I think at this point even I would save it with black here with the queens coming off. But a couple moves earlier, it's anybody's guess what would happen. Hans goes queen h4, trying to keep the queens on. You go queen e7. Very solid move here from Magnus. Now if you go queen g4, there's even h5 potentially, so Hans is forced to trade the juicers on e7. Now he goes knight f1, and now you get king g7. White is completely fine here, by the way. It is equal, but black has the knight on d5. You have the isolated pawn on d4. You get knight d2, good move. You got bishop a7, logical move from Magnus here. King f1, rook e7. Magnus going very fast here. No risk for Magnus to lose the game, though, which is a big plus here. Knight c7, trying to reroute the knight to b5 to go rook d7. Get rook d7, very solid move here. Knight e3, probably knight b5 or knight e6, both moves playable. Knight c2, very good move from Hans. f5 played. Now Magnus is starting to even up on the clock a little bit. You're getting bodied in an endgame by the greatest player of all time here, and now you start to know that you're in trouble. In fact, I think already here Hans knows he's in quite a bit of trouble, but he's still trying to go very fast here. Which I think is one important thing to note about the situation is if this were online, the approach of going really fast is good because Magnus's mouse skills are not great, but over the board, when you go too fast and you get to a spot like this, Magnus over the board is much different than Magnus online. When he's using his hands to move versus the mouse, it's a lot different. There are so many games that he plays where he'll mouse slip and do other things when he gets low on time, but over the board is very different for Magnus. So we get king c3, pawn takes pawn. Hans is looking to grab the juicer. He kind of has to grab the juicer. Magnus plays knight g5, an excellent move here, hitting the pawn on h3, threatening to remove the knight to e4 to fork the pawns and the king. And it's already very bad for Hans Niemann here. Very bad. He's going to need a bit of a miracle. Time is evening out too, and Magnus is simply outplaying Hans here, just outplaying him completely here in the home stretch of the game. Completely outplaying him. Hans now realizing he's made some mistakes, getting a little bit nervous here. He's getting low on time as well. Plays rook f1. Magnus now has multiple moves. He goes knight e4. We're going to get king d3. Only move, of course. Magnus for a second, I think, thought he was winning with bishop takes knight, and now he realized, you see the look? That's the look of, man, I thought it was a winning, but it's not, so I have to keep going. Finds knight c5 and knight a4. Now he wins the pawn on b2, and now Magnus is starting to clean up the game here. You take the pawn on b2. Nice little tickle. You take knight b4, nice little tricky move. Of course, in endgames, knights are very tricky to deal with. Get rook d7, king c3, knight a4, king c2, very important move. Knight c5, idea of knight e4 to reroute the horse, and then hit the pawns on f2 and g3. We get knight d2 here. Tick tock. Magnus goes knight e6 here. Solid move. Get knight b3 here. Magnus has to make the choice. Does he want to keep moving quickly? Does he want to spend his time? Still thinking. He goes g5, not a bad move. We got f3, probably h5, try and play on the king side. He goes bishop b8, not a bad move either. G4, knight f4. Now Hans super low on time, plays rook to e1, very tricky move. Bishop to e5, good move. King b1. Hans trying to move the knight to c5 and do something. We get rook c7, king, rook d1, rook c3, king a2, rook takes f3. Now Magnus up a ton of pawns. Still knight c5 is a very, very good move. See, at this point Magnus does this because he thought it was just over, and the knight c5 keeps the game going to where you don't win instantly. Now he goes king f7, we get take. Magnus now playing in bullet mode, king f6. Now with the 2p on the king side, he's going to push his p, and Hans can't really stop the p anymore. And now you just lose the game. d7, goes king takes f5, takes a5, knight c6, rook a2, king back, bishop f6, very good move. Take on a5, we get king g4. Actually, he played rook b5, not knight a5. A lot of credit to Hans Niemann here defending, though, because he's keeping this game going to where it's not just over immediately. And knight c3, very, very good technical decision, force an endgame with 2 pawns on the king side, and white has no way to really defend this. We get rook c5, bishop f6. White has to start pushing the a pawn. You got to push your p. We get rook a2, a5, h5. Knight b4, probably rook a4 or rook a1. Magnus looking at the squares. He goes to a4. He goes rook c4, king f3. Hans very nearly flags on the clock there. And now Magnus goes for the endgame. You get king g3, a6, rook a4. And now you simply have 2 pawns on the king side, and this is too easy to play. Now Magnus is going to win the game. Let's see if he's going to slam the king at the end of the board. Rook a5, king b3, h3, king b4, rook a1, king b5, h2. End of the game. Magnus wins. He gets the win, throws his hands up in the air. Very nice performance. Takes the king and just slams it on the d5 square, or slams the king on the e5 square, wherever it is. Magnus gets the win. He wins the match, and he moves on to the semifinals. So that's my commentary, you guys. Maybe you like the other guy's commentary a little bit better. Let's replay a little bit with the guy's commentary. Let's listen to the very end here of his commentary. Let's see if he views it the same way.
By h2, and Hans Niemann resigns. What an exciting game. I've never seen Magnus Carlsen so nervous and shaking even his hands. Look at that move.
Look at that move.
He almost punched through the board. They had her ups and downs in the past, and there was clearly a lot at stake between these
slammed it through the board. Slammed it through the board. That was a good video, actually. That was a pretty good video. That was a good one. That was really funny. Really, really funny. I was very good. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you.